Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Hey, this is Paul Pearson. I've hosted the R&B show Star Time since the very beginning of Rainier Avenue Radio, and after years of featuring tracks from the 50s through the 80s, Star Time now plays R&B and hip-hop from the 1990s as well. A whole half century of soul, funk, hip-hop, and more on Star Time, Wednesdays at 2 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Support for Rainier Avenue Radio comes from Cascade PBS, presenting season 2 of Out and Back with Allison Mariella Desir. Join Allison as she explores the Pacific Northwest with changemakers who are reclaiming space in the outdoors and creating opportunities for local BIPOC communities to engage with nature and find joy and healing. It's available now on Cascade PBS app and airing on KCTS 9 Thursdays at 8:50 p.m.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Juan Cotto touching bases with you live from the Columbia City Theater, home of your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And I got my buddy, my friend, my patriot on this show. Mr. Mick Hoffman is back with us after, Mick, we had 2 weeks of your talented staff here, and Justin here, and we had Cindy Adsit last week. We had some good conversations, and the WIAA is in good hands.
Yeah, no, we have a great team. We have good people, work hard, smart, enjoy what they do. So I appreciate you having them on, and I really appreciate them coming in and being able to talk about what they do.
We had some really good conversations about different aspects of sports. This is what we do here on Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. We sit down and we talk about some of the issues affecting our youth and children in sports throughout the state of Washington. The Washington Interscholastic Activities Association oversees the sports, and Mick obviously works with a variety of different educators all throughout the state of Washington to make sure that sports are fair and equitable, and we certainly, as parents, appreciate it. And we also always have some interesting things to talk about. But first of all, let me do a couple of promos so I can get these in my memory, fresh in my memory, here at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Fresh Juice. Fresh Juice celebrates, this is a misprint, 700 episodes of Fresh Juice. And I got to thank, and we want to congratulate our producer here, Daniel Bellis, who is such a good guy. Daniel, first of all, you know I love you. You are a brother to me, and so many different events that we've done over the last several years. But I cannot believe, you've done 700 events. You should get I hope that YouTube is going to send you one of those plaques they give out, and I hope you're doing that. And I hope Tony also gives you a pay raise. I know you're cracking up back there. Hey Tony, how you doing? But 700 episodes tomorrow at 9 p.m. So you got to tune in for that. I may even join in on that 700th episode to give you a little bit of crap. There are 2 new shows joining our Rainier Avenue Radio lineup Thursday nights, Seeking Change at 5:30 p.m., and then the Center of Voices at 8 p.m. So those are obviously going to be some good things that we're going to be able to listen to. And then later this month, the Rainier Avenue Radio celebrates Earth Day, and there's going to be a lot more information. Earth Day is more than just a day, April 22nd to April 26th. It's Earth 4 days here at Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and there's going to be a variety of different things to learn about on Earth Day to protect our planet, to protect our civilization, and to protect our world. And those are all very, very interesting things that you can learn about, and I'm sure that Tony will have some really cool things for people to do in the community, and I'm glad to see that we are having those conversations, because a healthy body, a healthy mind, and healthy planet makes for good people, Mick. And welcome back to your spot where you need to be on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Did you get a little break? Did you get a little time off for yourself?
We took a few days, took the kids, grandkids down, and went to California. I actually ran into the rain in San Diego. So took them to the zoo and did that kind of thing, a little touristy thing for a weekend. And I actually went up to the California Association was meeting, and I sat in and observed a couple days of their executive board meetings and met with their staff. I heard Swen Nader speak. He played for John Wooden.
Yes, sir.
He said, what made John Wooden so good, not only was he just a good man, but every year he'd pick one thing he wanted to get better at, and he'd go figure out who he thought was the best. And then he would go in his off season and go spend a week with that person, just pick their brain. So I said, man, if that's good enough for John Wooden, it's definitely good enough for me. And the association works my 5th year, but I was a school guy. So Ron Nichetti down there does a really, really good job. I'm really impressed when I listen to him speak. In California is, a monster-sized state. Very political. So we talked about getting together and me coming down. And so since I was on vacation, went up there. Tammy spent a couple days with me there, and got to sit in on their meetings. They rent out a hotel and have 60 people in their boardroom, boardroom. Wow. It's a lot different operation, but I'm thankful for the way we do it, but I learned quite a bit and got some pretty good ideas from those guys.
What's the one thing you think you'd like to improve, or is that something you're in a process of study?
Yeah, I mean, our board meetings right now go pretty smooth. We've combined them to one day, and ours are a combined kind of work session and business. And I think we need to find a way to do a little more time on the work session. So maybe set up work sessions outside of the board meeting to prepare to go in, possibly. But what I really liked is they did some student recognition at the luncheon. And that's something that we've talked about with Janae being on board now. You got to meet her earlier this year. She's in charge of our awards program and trying to get this off the ground for a few years. So Hall of Fame's coming up for us, and she's running that. And then next year we're going to add some of the student recognition. So recognize students who are just like unbelievable with their accomplishments and everything they do beyond sport. And then also recognize and honor students that have overcome, really hard challenges in their world, whether they're health or otherwise. And, give those kids some love and recognition for having the perseverance, the things we talk about. So I witnessed them do that ceremony down there. And what's funny was Ron said, as he walked into the room, there's 100 people in this room. He was going up to the 6 families, and he was walking by one, and he heard one of the siblings say, man, everybody looks so miserable in here, because we just come out of this 3 hours of board meeting, and everybody's so serious, you're in suits and ties and all that. And he said, I looked around the room and I was like, that kid's right. We do look miserable. Here we're doing work that's supposed to be fun. And then he said, but as he sat back and watched this take place, as we honored students and heard about their accomplishments, people's demeanor completely changed by honoring students. And what we do, the forefront of what we do is take care of kids. And so I think that's what was my biggest takeaway, is we have to find a way to incorporate that more into the business part of it. We got to take care of business, pay the bills, and make sure things are in place with all the legal stuff, but make sure that we're finding ways to honor kids. So.
Speaking of which, and before we go into our program, they were asking questions today about student leadership in sports teams and student leadership in athletics. Let's stick on California just a little bit, Mick. I noticed at their state football games, we announced, or the WIAA announced, that they're going to be playing their games back at Husky Stadium this year.
Yeah.
But in the California Bowl, I remember that was a big thing that they did a decade ago, and they were having those games at that place I believe in Carson, California. I can't think of the name of the stadium. They always seem to change sponsors so often. It was in Carson, California. Now they are playing those state championship games at smaller regional sites.
Wait, can you say that again, please? So state of Washington, we're playing in big stadiums, and California's in small high school type facilities.
They are playing in big, small college facilities and big high school facilities.
Imagine that.
They're not in the Carson thing anymore. I remember when the California Bowl got started. I want to say that was 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And obviously the kingpin school at the time was De La Salle Concord, the team that won 151 games in a row until their win streak was snapped by the team over across the water. And I think a lot of us who follow high school sports remember that story. 2004, the Bellevue Wolverines knock off the De La Salle Spartans, Bob Ladouceur and that incredible program they have done there. But they have the California Bowl, and now they are moving those games. And they used to have, like we did, we had a big schedule of games in one location in Carson. They're now moving those games across the state.
Yeah. Ron and I have talked about that, and for football, they can't get the large facilities at a reasonable price. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're so thankful for University of Washington. We just are working on finalizing the paperwork, but re-upping. New coach Jed came in and he supported it, and before Tony left, he supported it. So Dan Erickson and Andy from their office and Andy Barnes in our office have that deal set up for the next 2 years. We're very grateful for what they're doing, because that's an experience. That's something those kids and coaches aren't ever going to forget. It's fun for the fans. I will say, though, they do run their basketball at the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings make them a smoking deal, and they don't get to do the laser. They told me to turn that laser on. You know how they do that in the game? The cost, and I know I heard this right, was like $20K
to run the laser,
to turn it on, which is almost more than to rent the thing for the day if they do that after each game. So there's some energy there. But we're very, very fortunate. And now Lumen Field is interested in hosting. So we're because the Huskies came on board first and are interested in doing it the way we did it. We're loyal people,
but still, it has to be a good deal for the WIAA.
Yeah, we got to be able to pay for it. So one of the things that will come out at our board meeting coming up is we actually lost money on our 3A, 4A basketball tournament this year because attendance was down so much. Wow. You can't sustain that long term. So we have some strategies we'll do, and a lot of it comes with matchups. The Yakima facility was phenomenal. The 1A, 2A tournament, we had to quit selling tickets for a while. We were full.
Is it a bad thing?
No, I always say that's a good problem, right?
Thing, yeah.
Everybody got in. We just had to let the one game finish and get some people out, and everybody got in. So there wasn't an issue with that other than a delay. So I think that's a great thing, because it's a great environment. Think about being a player in a sold-out dome. That's pretty awesome. And so, we get the right matchups. It'll come back to Tacoma. We trust people to come back. We'll work on some marketing, and we'll get it worked out.
It's always so good to see Mick, because he's also a basketball guy. He loves to talk sports. And sometimes when we get into those sports conversations, and if you will indulge with me just for a second, Mick, ESPN on Sunday had the largest basketball audience ever. NBA, NC2A, whatever it was. On Sunday, the women's national championship game drew their highest audience ever, over 14.5 million viewers, to see South Carolina, led by Universal superstar Don Saley, who is now turned into one of the greatest coaches in women's basketball history, in basketball history,
coaches ever,
versus who many consider the greatest college player of all time, Caitlin Clark. And that matchup, and the Caitlin Clark matchup versus the University of UConn and Gino Auriemma on Friday night, held the record for 40, maybe 36 hours as the most watched basketball game on ESPN. NBA, college basketball tournament games, when ESPN used to do them, these were the two highest viewed games in the history of ESPN.
Yeah.
And my congratulations to all of the schools involved. Connecticut, my congratulations to South Carolina, and obviously Caitlin Clark and what her accomplishments have done for women's basketball.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you think about that, just a few short years. But you mentioned two, talk about ambassadors. You have Caitlin Clark from the play and Dawn Staley. I mean, Dawn Staley, you listen to her talk, you watch her interact, you're like, that's who I want to play for. Like, she makes you want to go do it. And she obviously knows what she's doing, but she also has those other, we talk about leadership, those other skills that bring people together. New starting five, and they still win the thing. And yeah, it's great basketball. Last year when the Elite Eight was here in town, a bunch of us from our office, we went down and watched. Haley was playing with Louisville, and Caitlin Clark was here for Iowa.
That's right.
I mean, I told people when we got done, it's one of the best basketball games I've ever seen. Just the style of play, the quality of play, the skills, and they play hard. And so it's not surprising that they're getting there. I sure hope that we start to get that kind of support for our women in Washington who are going out playing on the girls' side of the games as well. That we can fill some places and watch them. Haley did it in Yakima a few years ago. But it's fun basketball to watch. So.
We are Juan Cotto and Mick Hoffman on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio World. In the 1986 Masters, Mick, Ken Venturi said, as Jack Nicklaus and Sevi Ballesteros and Tom Kite were fighting it out for the 1986 Masters, he said, I'm so nervous watching these guys. My palms are sweating. The emotion of the games, the emotion, and certainly how ESPN and really the sponsors had promoted Caitlin Clark versus some of these other schools. You had people, and I would see it on my social media, people who were extremely rooting hard for Connecticut. They were rooting hard for LSU when Haley took on Caitlin Clark, and what a valiant effort she put out there. And then obviously the game on Sunday with South Carolina. These were emotional contests, and that meant a lot to everyone who seemed to be watching. And I, who am not a connoisseur of the women's game, I was sneaking peeks at the score, trying to find out what was going on.
Yeah, and what I thought was really cool is they're competing hard, right? But they're not trying to tear each other down. I mean, what Coach Staley say at that? She's recognized. She gave a shout out to Caitlin Clark, right? You talk about Caitlin Clark with some of the controversy against LSU last year, and they don't dig into it. They don't try to keep going at it. And even the LSU team, Angel Reese and Haley, they let it go, and they spoke. They're like, yeah, we're competitors. We get between the lines. Yeah, we're getting after it. We're going to go. There's going to be good basketball here in Seattle this year with the Storm. I mean, what the Storm are putting together with their squad again. I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun. We saw it a couple years ago with Sue Bird. So the women's game has grown a ton, and you have good people. They have the right people who are their stars right now, and hopefully, that next generation will keep coming through, and it'll maintain that high level of competition with great integrity. John
Wooden said one time that the pros are so good it makes your eyes tired. When you watch the NBA games, you have five guys on the floor. The 7'5" guys can handle the basketball. Last night's championship game, the women's game, it was great to see team basketball.
Yeah.
Some of the constants at Fogg, Allen, and the great coaches of best, John Wooden, the shots coming off of the rotations of the basketball. Although for all you folks that were rooting against Caitlin Clark, she does have a little physical play in there. It pushes people off just a little bit. But, if I could shoot the three-pointer like that, I would too. But it really speaks a lot to how the game is played in a team concept.
Yeah.
And to me, at both the college level last night and also and the unbelievable way that UConn can pick up their defensive effort. And team concepts and how they were able to keep the big guy Edey off the scoreboard in the second half and slow him down and get out on their rotations. The whole team game came back to life, both watching the women and the NCAAs last night.
Yeah, it was interesting. Some of the teams that underachieved were the ones with, a lot of individuals on their team, and they play an individual style game. UConn men, they had a bunch of transfers on there too, but there's a system there, an expectation, and so you could see that within the team, there's something there going on, leadership and expectations, kind of like what we used to see with the Patriots, right? For a long time, there's a system, like you're part of the system, and anybody can come in that's willing to buy into that system. And I think in the women's game, it'll be interesting over the next few years because we have some young women now, you know, from Caitlin Clark's range to Reese's ability inside, and how fierce of a competitor she was. You know, those kind of stand above what we typically have seen. So as that becomes more of the norm, it'll be interesting to see, you know, if that same type of energy of interest of the fans stays with it, or if it gets back to the NBA where you watch the NBA and you just expect these, you know, incredibly athletic plays. So, you know, that will be a little bit interesting. I hope it maintains that as, you know, a father and a grandfather of females. You know, that nothing's worse than when we walk into one of our gyms and, you know, you have a game that's a really, really good basketball game, but the crowd is down, and then you have a boys game that's not a very good game. You have more people there, right? And so, you know, what do we do with that? So that's, you know, those are things we're trying to figure out. How can we help people recognize and understand? So hopefully this will give a whole different perspective of women's basketball.
You know, I think the beautiful thing about Caitlin Clark and looking at the conversations is that she has been able to also elevate the names of the past by her being called the GOAT. And it was really interesting because I saw people say, wait a minute, Cheryl Miller's the GOAT. Yeah. Shamika Holtzclaw's the GOAT. Sue Bird is the GOAT. Lauren Jackson was the GOAT, which is really, really interesting. And maybe that's a good place where women's basketball is that now we're going to start recognizing some of the players of the past.
Yeah. And it's more common to have somebody that stands out that much, that the game is elevated. I mean, you think about it, is, you know, you listen to them talk, hey, we've been playing against each other in AAU basketball since we were in 7th grade. Like, okay, so that now we're starting to see the benefits of a more competitive, more invested basketball program around female athletics and not just the male side. So my guess is we'll probably keep seeing that. Then it'll be, does that just become so normal it's no longer that special, or that we now have 20 teams like that, so that Elite Eight isn't as big a game because we've seen that through the whole entire tournament. Hopefully people don't start taking that for granted.
Danish Rossi, you beat us too many times here in Seattle for us to consider you as one of the great players. I don't actually enjoy seeing you come into our building anymore. So congratulations on you and Sue Bird's little broadcast. That was a lot of fun to watch as well. And it was amazing that they had the double broadcast going. A lot of interest in women's basketball. So congratulations to ESPN on the audience. Congratulations to Dawn Staley and the incredible South Carolina Gamecocks and a tremendous victory. And obviously congratulations to Caitlin Clark on an incredible career at the University of Iowa. 700 episodes. 700 episodes. Daniel, Mick and I are at like 35 or 40 maybe. Have we done 40? I don't know what we are at. But anyways, fresh juice. And we just love our man Daniel, and we can't promote this enough. The 700th episode on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and all the things those crazy guys have done over the years. Daniel has kept this thing going, and he really speaks to a lot of different folks in the hip-hop scene and the music scene. And it's just one of those, it's fresh juice. It really is a fresh production, and good luck Thursday night with that. Did I get everybody? Is it Thursday night? Is it Wednesday night? It's right there where you can see it. I can't see it, but I want to make sure I get it right for you. 700 episodes. Congratulations to you, Mick. Let's move on to these topics here around student leadership. It's crucial for the successful sports teams. We saw that this weekend. How do you define student leadership within the context of high school athletics?
Well, you know, if a young person can get other young people to follow them and respect them and listen to them, that's how you define leadership, right? It's getting people to understand what to do and to do it. And for those that aren't quite at that maturity level, getting them to fall in line, essentially. So, you know, you look at teams, and it's not always your best player, right? And a lot of time, when your best player is your best leader, that's when magic happens, right? When your best player is your worst teammate, that's when you don't make playoffs or you're out pretty quick. We go through history of that if we wanted to in this. I mean, we see it, right? But if you have strong leadership that other kids respect, it just creates a totally different environment. And at the high school level, it's even more important now. We see it at the pro level more. But now even at the high school level, it's more important because kids have played more. They know more than what they used to know. They don't rely on the coach as much for the basic knowledge and skill development. And so having kids that can kind of set the expectation for each other that's the difference between a big win and getting by. So
it seemed like when I was coaching high school football, and it seems like the captains are such a particular role, and everyone wants to be the captain. I've had kids who weren't the greatest students, and they were extremely good athletes, and they wanted to be the captain. I had kids who were great students, worked extremely hard, and they kind of didn't want to be the captain, but we kind of pushed them into the role because, like you said, it's not always the best player, but someone who represents what you want as a coach within the organization. And sometimes being the captain, to their credit, gave a couple of kids who a leadership role, and it was one of the first times they've ever had that leadership role, and it helped them develop into better students even. Can you discuss the role of student captains and team leaders in fostering a positive team culture, which drives performance on and off the field?
Yeah, I think the first thing is how you pick your captains is really important. If you let the students do it in a public vote, they're going to defer to probably the best players, right? Mm-hmm. Which sometimes isn't the person who's leading by example. That's not what I mean. So I know over time I changed how I did it. I'd let students pick one or two, and I'd pick, as a coaching staff, we'd pick one or two. And we would talk about why we picked who we picked. So that would be part of before you vote. And we would vote privately, right? Obviously, my pick was public, but the kids wouldn't have to publicly say who they were voting for. So that way, and we would talk through before we would do that. We would spend a few days each season. We'd always have returning ones. So we tried to stack them, by grade level. So you had returning kids. And so I think that's important, is how you pick them, because that sets up the students to understand the why of what the captain is. The other piece is what do they do off the floor? Well, as soon as the season ends, you got to get back in the weight room. You got to start playing. During the season, out of season, you got to make sure you know what they're doing on Friday night, Saturday night, right? What kind of decisions are they getting? Grades? If you got a really talented player that you really need talent-wise that maybe has trouble in the classroom or trouble at home, it's hard for the coach to always be the one there. So a captain can kind of become a brother to that person. And help them out and look out, keep coach informed on where coach can lean in and help. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can do captains. It's really interesting. I love listening to coaches talk about how they use captains and how they pick them, because there's so much that can be done. Sometimes it's ceremonial, coin flip, meeting at half court, seniors, you got it, whether they're the ones leading or not. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways of doing it. I would think it's such a critical role. You want to be very intentional in what you're doing.
When you ask the coaches on your staff, why did they pick this player? What were some of the things that you expected them to say, and what were some of the things that they actually said on terms of how that player represented the program?
A lot of it was, do kids respect them enough to follow them, right? So when they're playing and they're on the floor and things, you think about how many times a coach, and I did this a lot as a young coach, I'm screaming at them to settle down. No, wait a minute. Think about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I finally had somebody say, Mick, you yell when it's going well, and you're really calm when it's going bad. Like, that's how you need to do it as a general rule. And so you find students that can do that. You like, as a basketball guy, you're in an open gym, you're watching kids. Who are kids that pick teams, divide them equally, that can keep the peace out on the floor, can settle differences? Like, kids will demonstrate leadership, like what you want. So you have to know what you want out of your captains, and then you need to be able to see it from them. And then, so coaches, hopefully they're telling me the things we're looking for as a staff. And if they really think that there's a kid who deserves it because X, Y, Z, then they would advocate for that, right? Because maybe they're like, Mick, we really need Juan to be a captain. I know right now he's not quite where we would want him to be, but I'm pretty confident he can grow there. We'd have a discussion. Okay, why is that? How do we know? Okay, let's sit down with Juan and find out. And we'd sit down before we'd announce it and say, okay, hey, here's one of the things we're thinking about. Sometimes for that kid, maybe one of the things we didn't know is he never had adults believe in him like that. Like he didn't see it in himself. So he never rose to that. Now we're saying, we see this potential and here's why. This is what we'd love for you to be able to do. Can you do that? We know you'll slip once in a while. We can work with that. So I think you have to know what you want, and then you just go to work with your team, who you have. So
with Mick Hoffman back, it's so much fun. The time just flies. I can't believe we've already hit the first commercial break. So we are going to go to the commercial break, and we will come back in a couple of minutes on your community radio station with your executive director of the WIAA, Mick Hoffman.
Rainier Avenue Radio. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to
How
say.
does generational wealth play into my family's history, my children? What am I doing for my children to perhaps build them more wealth? I think it goes both ways, because for many immigrant families who are laboring constantly to live, your children are raised a certain way. Your children adopt certain values, which then will become their life and how they live it. When I see folks that perhaps have copious generational wealth, I see a whole different mindset, different ways of treating people. And I see it in my own children too. I feel like a lot of those values, in a lot of ways, begin to get lost when you don't have to work so hard to
This
live.
campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhoods Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.org.
What's going on, world? It's your boy OG Mambo.
And your guy D Money. Join us along with Pint Size Patron and ID Yourself
Here on Fresh Juice at Rainier Avenue Radio.
every Wednesday hump day from 9 to 11 Pacific.
Get exclusive interviews from your favorite artists, all the hottest music, and updates on what we got going on in the world.
That's every Wednesday, 9 to 11 p.m. on Seattle's Rainier Avenue Radio.
Turn up your radio wherever you at. We about to bring it. Street Beat.
Yeah.
With Tony B.
Tony B will give you a chance to tackle local, national, and international issues that affect your community.
Street Beat. Street Beat. Tony.
We need your help finding community members to help shape the future of your utilities and the environment. We have two exciting opportunities for the public to work with Seattle Public Utilities: the Customer Review Panel, CRP, and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC. CRP and SWAC are looking for new members to contribute expertise and passion to help improve utility services and advance our commitment to environmental stewardship and social justice. Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Hey, can you run that back? Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Thank you. Application deadline for both opportunities is Tuesday, April 23rd.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
Hey, welcome back to your community radio.world. Juan Cotto and Mick Hoffman here at the historic Columbia City Theater, 4916 Rainier Avenue South. And drop by sometime if you're sitting there at enjoying a lemonade after work. You can always come by and you can ask us questions. You can take over the show. We will give you a chance to sit up here and you can pretend you are the overseeing athletics in Washington State. We always appreciate the questions we get. We always appreciate you looking at the show on the internet. And I know that Daniel's got it lined up on a variety of different social media channels, including YouTube and Instagram and so forth. So please feel free to comment at your leisure. A couple things I want to bring that I did not touch bases on in the first half of the show. If you need tax help, and it is certainly 3 days away, Street Beat is having a tax help edition that's going to be coming up here on April 10th at 12 noon. And Obviously, I think this is a good time to have that street beat tax help, so you can start to learn more about what needs to be done to turn in all of that information that the tax codes will make you fill out. Hopefully, you're just a single form guy, one of those 1080 EZs or 1040 EZs. But if you have a little bit more complicated thing that you are turning in, one of those forms, Street Beat will help you out with that. That's going to be hosted by Tony B. It's an important one because we don't want the auditors to come knocking at your door. We want you to pay your taxes and pay your fair share. But that's going to be April 10th at noon on the community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Earth Day is a big thing, and Tony has always been such a friend to the environment and having conversations about the environment, and he is utilizing Rainier Avenue Radio again to amplify that message. We're going to be having conversations, and more than conversations, we are really going to make sure that our community here, which sometimes gets overlooked in the conversation about the environment, Tony's going to have a variety of different programming and interesting groups of people talking about Earth Day, more than just a day on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's like 4 days. It's like the 22nd through the 25th. But we are going to make sure, let me get that right for you, the 22nd to the 26th. So we're going to have a variety of different conversations, and I hope that you'll take a few moments to listen in on what we are trying to look at to make sure that, once again, you want to make sure that your health is good. You want to make sure that your neighborhoods and communities are good. And if the environment is good around you and it's safe and if it is clean and you have things that we take for granted in the United States, just drinking water for crying out loud, and things that we have here. And we'll continue to have those conversations and how you can play a role in them. So plenty of exciting and good content coming up here. And of course, and we'll say it again, the 700th edition of Fresh Juice. Oh yeah, don't miss that. Right there on your screen. Daniel B., appreciate you so much. And man, and you and I closed out a lot of places, man. I think Daniel Bellis and I closed out one night. We closed out Lumen Field during those football games a couple of years ago, which is me, Daniel, and the lady down there in the field telling us to get out. She's like, will you guys hurry up and get out of here? That was beautiful. So Fresh Daniel, man, just appreciate you so much. And Fresh Juice, man, it's a major, major milestone on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Going back to the conversation about student leaders on athletic teams, how do student leaders contribute to the team cohesion and unity, and what strategies do they embody to motivate and inspire their teammates?
You know, I think a lot of that question, I think a lot of it's intrinsic. I just think some people just have an ability to bring people together, and some people have the innate ability to divide people. And we had a kid on our team. His name was Jeff Terrell. Great kid, point guard. And it was when I was first starting with the program. So we were okay. We were really very young, and he was a little bit older. He graduated, went up to Skagit to play. And the next year we were playing, and man, we just didn't have that same cohesion in the team. And, you know, just things, there's more conflict between kids and just wasn't as fun. And he came back at Christmas. It's probably a WIAA violation now, I realize. But
sure.
He came back at Christmas and he called, hey, coach, can I come in the gym and hang out with the guys? Like, yeah. So then he goes, hey, can I throw on some practice gear and practice with y'all? And so we're like, yeah, that'd be great. And he came out, and just how people responded to him and how he interacted, this very genuine, like everybody, all of a sudden the mood was up. Everybody was having fun and everybody's kind of goofing around. And we were sitting there with my longtime assistant coach, George Spear. We just looked at each other and goes, that's what we're missing. We're missing Jeff Terrell. Like just the way, he was a good player, good enough to play some small college, but he wasn't like dominating. But it was just how he interacted. He just made everybody feel good about being there, made them feel welcome. He just had this upbeat personality. He was a kid who battled homelessness and, you know, divorced family and all kinds of stuff. But he just, the person of who he was, he did that. And I don't know how you create that, honestly. I don't know how you do that. And so,
is social media making it more difficult? I hate to put so much on social media, but now that I'm a parent, I will. I had a meeting with our Highline kids. We had our one out of season meeting that we could have. And we came and we sat down and I brought some ice cream in and we all talked about some goal setting for the season and what we wanted to do and when we wanted to do our strength and conditioning. And at the end of it, one of the players they looked around and looked at each other and said, "Coach, I'm so glad you did this. We actually like each other." And, I think sometimes you get the kids are getting so locked into all of these things that they have that they forget that getting together is a good thing.
Yeah, how fun it is to be with people. Right. Yeah, and I think the other piece with that is, we probably all say stuff we shouldn't say at some point, and it can be misconstrued. How easy is it to misinterpret an email or a text, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if people are constantly putting out stuff on social media, all of a sudden a teammate sees or hears something and might make an assumption which isn't intended, and it creates that friction, right? So today's world is a totally different world than what we had, even when I was coaching. And so, I think there's the potential because everything you say and do is amplified and available to everybody, that can happen a lot faster. Where back in the day, it had to be said, or you were together doing it, and it's like, well, that's not what he said at all. But now it could be somebody posts that you said this about, and now you and I are going at it, and it might be nothing not even close to the truth. And by the time we get back together, we've already gone down these paths of retaliating and responding that it's hard to walk that back once it happens. So I'm sure that's part of it. But there's just, you talk about natural leaders. Well, what is that? It's, somebody that can bring people together and move them in a common direction. And it's not always positive, right? We see negative with that too. I mean, that's when some of my previous work working with gang impacted students, some of the best leaders in the world, charismatic kids, smart, articulate, right? They just put their energy in something else, and they can move a lot of kids with them in that direction, thinking that it's not a big deal. It's it's a hard thing to teach. I will say, there's a program, Bruce Brown, right, Proactive Coaching. So they've partnered with a group called Neptune, and so it's called Neptune Proactive Coaching, and it's all the stuff Bruce used to go out and teach individually, all in a 1 hour segments, 8 of them. And so we've partnered with them to reduce the price to school. So essentially a school can get 8 hours of Bruce's stuff being read and videos and all that with that guaranteed with activities that you can do for $1,050 or whatever it is a year. You can make it available to your entire school. So we're talking beyond athletics, your DECA program, your CTE program, your band, you have access to all that. So there's some really good materials out there. Joe Ehrman with what they have going, Inside Out Coaching. So there's some really, really good programs out there. University of Washington's developed some unbelievable classes that just got launched around that. And so there's some ways of teaching some of the basic skills, but a kid's got to there's something innate, there's something just natural that has to be there as well.
Sure. So we talk about communication, and you brought some of the points that I wanted to ask in this particular question about communication, but let's move on to what you had just described. When I was back in the day, we didn't have obviously we didn't have social media. We actually had strings attached to cups, and we had SOS. We had a Morse code and things, but what sometimes some of the things that were tapped out weren't very positive, and you had to come up with conflict resolution strategies. When it was something that was said, somebody could deny it, or someone could apologize, or someone could say, "That's not what I mean to say," and we'd have a conversation. Sometimes we do it as our group of players. Sometimes we'd have the coaches also work with that with us. But there were times where we could get to the bottom of something, and it wasn't visible to us. Now these things are visible. They're either a tweet or a post or an X or Facebook, and however they see it. And we now have something that's visibly there. And how do we tone down the escalation of emotions around that? What are some strategies around conflict resolution that we can use with our student leaders, and our student leaders can lead to escalate or to de-escalate some of these?
Luckily, a lot of our schools have some of these strategies in place just for the general, culture of the school, the well-being of the school. But I think that's one where if the coach has been intentional in building culture within his team, right? Going back to the Bruce Brown stuff, culture happens. It's whether you're intentional with it or not. So if you've built that to where you have a process in place and mutual respect, like when something comes up, like we need to address this. And then within that, the coach and the student leaders of making sure everybody's voice is heard, right? That quiet kid who doesn't really say much is probably the most cerebral, deepest thinker on the team sitting there, and inviting that voice out to the table. So, if something's happened that's violated basically the trust of that team, kind of that inner circle, then how are we going to fix this? What can we do, right? And the team needs to be a part of that, and students have to be the voice within that, and then agree to what it is, and then whoever's violated that trust has to be willing to hear that, accept it, and do it, and actually do it with, that's where you can have other kids, where other opportunities for leadership can be, is like, you're going to be the one helping Mick make this right? We call it restorative practices now. We used to call it make it right? How do you make it right? So I think you just have to have that built in as a culture to your team. It can't be a one-off because Juan did it, we're going to make an example out of Juan. Like, it just has to be part of the program. And that's where, having those experienced coaches or having a system in place to be intentional in the culture and the expectation. Because it's going to happen. I mean, we have a process, the discriminatory form we've talked about. If somebody believes a discriminatory action is taken at some type of WI contest, they can report that to us. It can be a fan, a player, school, whoever. We become the conduit of information between the accused school doing the investigation and reporting back. And we can't take it back. And what we always tell schools is like, look, we understand what happened is wrong. This shouldn't happen. And luckily, we're seeing less of it, knock on wood. But we understand it's wrong. We can't make it go away. We can only try to make it better. But here's the one thing. You're like one 16-year-old from being on the other side of that, right? I mean, we're impulsive. They say our brains don't develop fully developed till 25, 26, 27. Coaches say stupid stuff when we're emotional, right? I still say stupid stuff when I get emotional. So it can happen. In this case, if it's discriminatory, we have a way to address it. And so I think we have to, we talk about education based. Kids are going to make mistakes. The adults we hold to a higher standard with the understanding, we can usually fix or make right. But with kids, it's going to happen. So you have to have that built into that. And the students understand that better than anybody, right? They understand what's really wrong and what is something that's fixable.
The frontal lobe, the frontal cortex of the adult male mind, still developing in your host, Juan Cotto, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio World, 4916 Rainier Avenue South, the historic Columbia City Theater. The executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, Mick Hoffman, again with us here today. And Mick, thank you so much for your time. Fresh Juice, 700 episodes tomorrow. We're looking forward to this. I'm sorry, Daniel, I can't see that far. I'm going to assume that is
410. It
is 410, so that is tomorrow. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Congratulations with that. If you need tax help, Tony B is doing a show on Street Beat. That's going to be tomorrow, 12 noon. Please make sure you get your taxes taken care of with all the new rules and laws and people looking after it and all the technology. People are going to come get you. So make sure that you get this done before they come after you and take care of that. And obviously for us to have a great nation, we need to have it funded. And we are the fundees of that. So that's why I always tell everybody to vote. And obviously we'll be talking about that throughout the summer. Mick, how do you empower these student athletes? How do you make sure that you give these young people ownership of the ability to lead? I mean, obviously as coaches, we put enough on them to develop this and develop our culture. But, how do we make it so they can actually take this responsibility on and lead their teammates in a positive and constructive manner?
Yeah, I mean, that's one, you give them titles, right, called captain or whatever is going on, and then you provide opportunities, whether it's in practice. Maybe they help develop a practice plan. Maybe they help develop a game plan, or maybe they take the game plan and help teach it to their teammates. Maybe they set up the team functions that you're going to do outside for that culture building. Definitely out of season is probably the greatest role a captain can play, other than just kind of tending to the team. You make sure people aren't violating your core covenants during the year. But setting up and getting people motivated to work out, a basketball team, go play Frisbee, right? Go play golf, go do something together to where everybody's invited. And I think that's, having people make sure everybody on that team is included in some way, shape, or form. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. We'd have, once in a while, we'd have players develop practice plan. There's certain things like, okay, we got to do some time on this, some time on this, time on this, set it up for us.
Are we still in a period of time when we get these kids especially as varsity athletes? So we're talking about after the age of 16. Do they tend to respond up to us? If we give them a title, if we give them a certain responsibility, do you feel this responsibility actually helps them mature?
I would think so. Those that want to do it, right? For some, it could push them away or have them find a place to hide. Some of them aren't ready to. So, that's something where you as the coach got to know your kids, and then hopefully they trust you enough to have an honest conversation with you, because they may not be ready. And that's what I'm saying. The best player is always being your captain is probably not the right thing to do for that very reason. You might be that kid may have so much pressure internally already because she's expected to, she's the pitcher and this and that and bat and cleanup. And now you're going to throw the captain on top of her too. It's like, she may not want that. That may not help her. And so she's going to lead just through her actions. You may need somebody else that can lead with their words. And so, I think, we're all different. You wouldn't want me leading this, right? But I lead an association. And so, we all have our strengths, and play to your kids' strengths.
Mentorship is a valuable tool for student leaders. How do coaches and other adults support and mentor student athletes to help them grow and develop in their roles?
Yeah, I think that's really, if you're going to build a comprehensive program, you look for mentors outside of your team, right? So within a school, there's a lot of adults. And again, we all bring different skills and characteristics. So knowing your students and what they need, that's how you can bring a mentor. It might be the Spanish teacher, and she comes in and works with your quarterback just because, they have they both have a common interest, and he just needs to have somebody talking to him and encouraging him. And there's a lady at Skyview High School, the reason I call that Miss Falk. She's at every sporting event. She's Miss Skyview. She's at everything. I'm like, she's a Spanish teacher? Like that's not a Spanish teacher I had. But that's what she does. Her brothers happen to be the basketball coach and the football coach at Jesuit High School in Portland, right?
She grew up with it.
Yeah, so sports were her life. And she happens to be a heck of a Spanish teacher. And so she's phenomenal. She taught leadership on top of it. So now you have a person like that in your school. She's great for that kid who maybe is important, a critical role, skill, but maybe not so confident. She's the one to have that. Because guess what? She can talk sports, and she can be that raw person. So I think there's you can be really creative with that to find what's the kid need, who can fill that need. Let's get them connected.
How do student leaders balance their academic responsibilities? And this is a big one, because as you just pointed out, a lot of them, they've got a lot on their plate. How do we make sure that we're balancing the academic responsibilities with the leadership roles that we're asking them to carry out? And are there any strategies that you've known that have been successful in helping kids balance all of this?
Well, one, coaches probably, we used to have the opportunity to have a study table. If we had late practice, girls were early, we were in the classroom, right? We're checking grades on a regular, but today's world, man, you can get on there and check grades like that. So, and that's where you talk about partnership and leadership. That's where you can partner with students, right? That's a place where they can help each other. And you talk about choosing your leaders. If a kid who has the ability in the classroom and is not doing it, how can you have them be your captain when they're fighting ineligibility all the time? And then they're on the floor and they're yelling at a kid to give their best effort. Like, they're not demonstrating that in everywhere. So you can't do it. If you have a kid who maybe has some learning challenges and is busting their tail, doing the best they can, and in that same academic situation, that might be a heck of a leader for your team, right? Because you're not writing a paper when you're out there. You're trying to demonstrate what it takes to win. And a kid who's battling through, like, think about how many times something goes wrong, a turnover on the goal line, air ball, free throw, people yelling at you, a strikeout. how many times that happens, you have to be able to overcome that. Who's better than that than somebody that goes to school for 12 years, getting their butt handed to them 6 periods a day, having to fight through whatever that is. They understand what that is. They're the ones who can help that star athlete that maybe hasn't dealt with failure before. So there's a lot of different ways that kids can help each other. Again, it's knowing what you got.
I'll never forget at Highline High School, my last year there, I had a senior, and my last year at Highline High School in 2012, and you can look it up, we were solid 0-9. We were a very, very solid. We were a good 0-9. And we played our final game against Ingram High School, and we won the game 70-62.
Wow.
Unbelievable night of scoring, if you like, offensive football. And
tell me you weren't the defense coordinator.
I was not the defensive coordinator.
Okay.
But I wasn't the offensive coordinator either. So, what was amazing that night, Mick, one of the seniors came up to me and said, "Coach, thank you." And he said, "Thanks for a great 4 years, and it's so good to know that if we had made the playoffs, I would have been academically eligible."
Oh, well, yeah. There you go.
And to me, and I was like, there's certain aspects of the season, and there's certain aspects of coaching that we tend to we get, we're never satisfied with the results of the season. I thought, geez, we could have won a couple more games, but when you think about it from that perspective, you won a big game.
Yeah. Now that kid had confidence that he could be successful in school. Mm-hmm. How many of those kids are going to go out and play college football? Right, but every one of them could go to college as a student. Now he believes he has a chance that he can do it. Right, there's a win. That's education based. Right, 100%. That's a great story.
Can you share any stories of your student athletes and student leaders who have demonstrated resilience and really the perseverance that comes with being a captain?
Yeah, when I was an assistant coach at Hudson's Bay, we had a kid who ended up going down to Oregon and playing football. Really good basketball player. And he lost his brother. His brother died suddenly during basketball season. Older brother, had a known heart condition, thought he was doing pretty well, went in for a stress test, went down, never came back. And we were in the stretch run of the season. He was definitely one of our best basketball players. And out of respect for his brother, his dad was a high school coach, right? And he wanted to play. And so for every kid who had an excuse why not to give their best, he was playing for his brother. So, that takes a lot of guts and courage when your family is just torn up from a sudden loss like that to go through it. So that was one. And then I had a kid who really worked hard. He was 6'7". His sister had CP. He was, it was a family that working hard to get by, really good people. And he blew his knee out after our 7th game his senior year. And his basketball career was over. He knew he probably wasn't going to go to college. And he ended up going to college, but not to play basketball. And he never felt sorry for himself. Our team, we were 6-1 at the time. And we had built our team around our 6'7" center, and we went to a 5'1" point guard in his place, and we changed our style of play, and we did fine. But he was there every single day with his teammates. He loved his teammates, and it was easy for them. And he would talk to them, and he was a very quiet kid. But when they didn't want to go to practice, Jeff was there watching. Right? And what would have he given to been able to put on the practice gear and come out on the floor? So when you have kids like that aren't sulking and feeling bad for themselves and still just want to be a part of it, it's pretty easy to feel inspiration from kids like that.
What do you talk to when you're coaching, and certainly, and we still are coaches to a certain extent, you and I both, but when we're talking about young people about athletics, and I'm shaken by that story you just told about that young man who the resilience. When we're speaking with these young student athletes, what opportunities exist for them in regards to the leaders and the leadership that they've developed? How do you let them know that, hey, this is going to transition with you into not only the classroom, but into your way of life in terms of developing a family and when you're running your business or when you're working your job? How do these skills transfer over? What do we share with our young people?
Yeah, I mean, that's as a coach, that's where you can bring outside people into your program that can come and speak to that, right? So you have a successful business lady in town. Have her come in and talk to your team about when she was an athlete, how that transitioned, right? How those skills are transferable. So you can bring people in to do that. You can give them examples of people within. So, I wish I would have done this more, but some people would have a guest speaker come in a little bit before every game and just tell kids stories, like whatever the theme was for the week. And so I think there's a lot of examples, you hear it and you see it on TV all the time. There's research data all over the place now that you just have to pull it together and figure out how you want to use it, because you could overwhelm them with it. But I think the best example is to bring in living, breathing examples. Sometimes it could be kids as parents. I mean, you think about that. If you bring in somebody's parent to speak to that, like who not in a glamorous job, right? But providing for a family that other of your families there respect, and you have mom, dad, whoever come in and talk through, and just have them be honest. It's not always easy, right? In our house, it can be hard, but here's because when I was in school, I was a tennis player and I had to grind it out against these club kids, and this is how I do that now in my life. The skills I learned then is what I do here. So I think that there's a way to, and again, when you're building culture within your family and mutual respect within your team.
Mick, always appreciate the candor. Always appreciate your time. This is a very, very busy gentleman, and he really is so committed to youth throughout the state, far, far more than what goes on a scoreboard or an athletic field. To build programs that really change the lives of our student athletes and ultimately change the lives of people in the state of Washington. And that's what we're here for. So we appreciate you so much for taking the time with us here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Hey, Tony B tomorrow, tax help, and of course, 700 episodes for Fresh Juice. Daniel, congratulations. Hey, we will see you next week here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.